Let's talk about what happens to the equilibrium in an economy when either the demand curve or the supply curve shifts. Before we do that, let's remind ourselves of what we studied in the first part of the semester. What happens when I have more than two variables to graph? Well, in that case, as we discussed before, if y is a function of x and z, the first thing we have to do is choose which variables we have to graph. In this case, I'm going to choose x and y. After that, I have to keep z constant. So I'm going to choose here first z equals 1. So that's how my graph looks. And then I can choose another z equals 2, so y equals x plus 2. That's how my graph looks now, instead of intercept equals to 1, intercept equals to 2. And the overall lesson was the following. When I move, or when I change any of the variables that I chose to graph, I move along the graph. But if I change the variables I did not choose to graph, in this case z, I shift the graph. Well, with that in mind, how do I apply this concept to supply and demand? Well, if you think about that, demand is a function of many variables. First of all, let's say I'm talking about my demand for t-shirts. Well, it depends on the price of the t-shirt. But it's also going to depend on my income. It is also going to depend on my tastes. It's actually going to depend on many variables. The main variables are listed here. The main determinants of demand, or the variables that influence buyers, well, the first of all is the variable that we actually chose to graph, price, here and here. But other variables are going to affect the demand. For instance, the number of buyers. Think about that. Let's say we're talking about the market demand in Murray, Kentucky. If Murray State accepts more students and the number of people living in the city of Murray increases, there is going to be a change in the market demand curve. Income, price of related goods, tastes, expectations, all of those are actually important variables that determine the demand of a good. I choose to graph quantity demanded, and I choose to graph price. So, if I change price, which is one of the variables that's in the axis, I move along the demand curve. We did that many times in the chapter so far. But if I change any of the other variables that are also important determinants of demand, but they are not in the axis, then I am going to shift the graph. Now, once I understand that, the next step is to intuitively determine if I am changing to the right or to the left. And the final step would be to verify what happened to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity in the economy. And actually, to do that is easier than it sounds. Let's practice that with some examples. Consider, for instance, the number of buyers. This is one of the determinants of the demand that I did not choose to graph. Therefore, they have to remain constant. If they change, the demand curve shifts. It's not the same demand curve anymore. Now, to see what happens, pick any hypothetical price. Let's say here, price equals 10. For that price, here is my quantity demanded, let's say 20. So the trick to decide if the demand is going to shift to the right or to the left is the following. Think about that. If you increase the number of buyers for one hypothetical price, in this case 10, do you think that the quantity demanded is going to go up around here or down around here? If you increase the number of buyers, it's actually intuitive that the number of t-shirts demanded are going to go up. So here's your new demand curve. Notice, for each price, I am now consuming more t-shirts. So you increase the number of buyers, the demand shifts to the right. Let's see another example. Consider now an increment in income. What is going to happen to the demand curve? Well, we already know it's going to shift because income is not in the axis here and is not in the axis here. Now the idea is it going to shift to the right or to the left? Well, that depends on the type of the good. There are actually two types of good. What is called a normal good, and it's called an inferior good. Well, as my example of inferior good, I like to use Taco Bell when I was in graduate school. When I was in graduate school, I didn't have any money. I was a broke foreign student. So I used to go to Taco Bell all the time. Now that I graduated, I am certainly not rich, but I'm not completely broke. I have a job. So do you think I go to Taco Bell more or less often than when I was a graduate student? I actually go to Taco Bell less often because I have more money. This is an example of inferior good. For each hypothetical price, say here, instead of consuming more Taco Bell, I actually consuming less Taco Bell. And that is true for any individual price you can think of. Instead of here, is here. So the whole curve shifted to the left. Now, on the other hand, consider now a normal good, or what is called a normal good. When you have a normal good, for each hypothetical price, instead of consuming here, I actually consume here. For this hypothetical price, instead of here, I actually consume here. So for a normal good, when there's an increment in income, the demand curve actually shifts to the right. Now let's talk about price of related goods. We are also going to have two options. The options are complement or substitutes. So let's say I increase a price of complement or substitute. No, I forgot to write it here. An increased income is a normal good. The demand curve shifts to the right. If it's an inferior good, it's to the left. Now, consider now an increment in price. First off, let's do a substitute good first. Two substitute goods can be, for instance, Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi. If you increase the price of Diet Pepsi, and I am talking about the market of Diet Cokes, the first thing to notice is this variable is not in the axis. Why? If I'm talking about the market of Diet Cokes, this is quantity of Diet Cokes. This is price of Diet Cokes. Therefore, the price of Diet Pepsi is not in the axis. If you start in the axis, instead of moving along the curve, I am going to shift the curve. Now let's think about that. I like both Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi. I have a slight preference for Diet Coke, but they are still substitutes. Now, imagine if the price of Diet Pepsi went from $3 to $13. For each hypothetical price, do you think I will consume more or less Diet Coke? The answer is, for a hypothetical price here, I will actually consume more Diet Cokes. And the demand curve actually shifts to the right. Think about it. Diet Pepsi is more expensive. I like both Diet Pepsi and Diet Coke. So for each price of Diet Coke, I'm actually gonna buy more Diet Cokes now because I don't have a good substitute anymore. Diet Pepsi got more expensive. But on the other hand, let's talk about a complement. In this case, one example could be coffee and sugar. I actually have my coffee black, but let's say that my taste was such that I only drink coffee and sugar together. If I cannot have them separately, what happens to my demand of coffee if the price of sugar goes up? Because I only consume them together, for each hypothetical price of coffee, the bundle coffee and sugar got more expensive. And remember, I only consume them together. So if the price of sugar go up, for each hypothetical price of coffee, my demand is actually going to shift to the left. Okay? Now, again, this is the price of coffee. But now sugar went up. So the bundle coffee and sugar is more expensive. So for a hypothetical price, instead of consuming all the way here, I'm going to consume only here. The hypothetical price was here. Instead of consuming here, I'll consume only here. So the curve shifted to the left. Tastes. If I like coffee more for some reason, my demand is going to shift to the right. Expectations. If I expect coffee to be more expensive tomorrow, I will increase consuming of coffee today. Therefore, using your economic intuition, you can see if the demand shifts to the right or to the left. Just fix a hypothetical price and ask yourself, with that change in this other variable, will my demand for this good shift to the right or to the left? With that in mind, let's see what happens to the equilibrium price and quantity in equilibrium when there's a shift in the demand. Now, when the demand shifts to the right, two things happen. First of all, the equilibrium price goes up from here to here, and the equilibrium quantity also goes up from here to here. So when I shift the demand to the right, there is an increment both in the equilibrium price, in the equilibrium quantity. On the other hand, you can guess that if I had shifted the demand to the left, then there would have been a decrease both in the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Next, we're going to talk about shifting the supply curve.